When a child is born, we do everything we can to protect them, nurture them, love them. A child's heart and mind are fragile. As they grow, we want to teach them everything we know. We send them to school to fill their minds with wonderful knowledge, to give them the tools they need for life. At school, they get a taste of what things are like in the world outside. There is friendship, romance, disappointment, embarrassment, discrimination, and bullying. But are the tools we give them enough to prepare them for this world? We have an enormous responsibility and an amazing opportunity. If we truly want to prepare them for the world outside, we must also educate the heart. Because to navigate the world outside with compassion, acceptance, and tolerance, we need to teach them compassion, acceptance, and tolerance. This can begin in our schools, and it can start today. It can happen at hockey practice, dance class, at day camps, and music lessons. And it's already happening around the world with astonishing results. If we want our children to grow into socially and emotionally capable young people, we must ask for balanced education that puts importance on educating both the mind and the heart.
At, chat, in, chin, ick, chick, arm, charm, ease, cheese, at, chat, in, chin, ick, chick, arm, charm, ease, cheese.
Duh. At. Dat. Buh. Et. Bet. Bet. I knew that. Slow it down. Huh. It. Hit. Hit. Come on, pal. It's my first day. At. Fat. Oh, that's it, buddy.
Good evening and welcome to this week's edition of Got School, the platform that has been created for you, the stay-at-home parent, for you, the distance teaching educator, for you, the student. Because what we've decided to do is bring content and insightful information, authors, educators, technology, curriculum. We've consolidated, brought it to you right here at Got School. Last week, we talked to Dr. William Jackson, who is a principal up in Seattle, Washington, who shared with us some very, very good information about how they are approaching student engagement by letting students lead the way. Tonight, we have a great author who's really focused on the school to prison pipeline, but changing the entire model of the American high school and what that's about. So we can talk about some things that we learned last week from Dr. Jackson. And to that point, Andrea, welcome to the show.
Hello, Steph. We've got school. Oh my goodness. This week has been really exciting in the aspect that I am letting my kids lead the way. I realized from last week with Dr. Jackson is that they really want to have a voice that's way different than what we're used to. And so I'm taking some of his Gen Z examples and allowing them to have a deeper voice in what that looks like for themselves.
You know, it's interesting that he brought up Gen Z as their designation, because a lot of people like to think that they're the lockdown generation because they've dealt with so much gun violence before COVID hit. And then it's the natural disaster generation because they're dealing with this climate change, which is real, by the way. But how they really focused and allowed the kids to lead the conversation and to lead the way.
Absolutely. And so one of the things that he shared with us is that his group there in Seattle are actually on the front lines of this movement. And I was really frustrated with my kids about getting on camera, but I realized that's a way for them to share their voice. They want to be back in school. And so they're modeling that instead of, you know, being in defiance or rioting or starting a march or whatever the other ways are that traditionally happen, is like, I'm just going to shut my camera off. I'm here. I'm talking to you. I'm present. But no, I don't choose to be on camera. And that's okay. I was really trying to push it, but I realized it's okay.
Yeah, and the intentionality of that to make sure that they can be mindful in the moment, and then use a lot of what they are sharing with us adults, use that as part of their curriculum to really give them an opportunity to flourish. And I know a lot tonight that we're going to talk to with Dr. Jim Wilson is going to kind of centered around allowing students to be more student, but also more forward thinking and more supportive by trade skills. And a lot of what Dr. Jackson talked about last week, it's really meaningful. So.
Right. So without further ado, I do want to add in with Dr. Jackson is that he also saw this opportunity for them to build community. And I want to keep reiterating that everything that we're learning here on Got School has to do with everyone being connected and feeling connected to the community. And the only way that we can do that is by providing everyone in the community a voice. And so,
yeah, that shared connective tissue, that was key to his foundation of his, basically he's writing his doctorate, or he wrote his doctorate on just that, the connective tissue between school, education, and the community.
Absolutely. So it's important, ladies and gentlemen, we are here. There's no other time in history in our lifetime where we can now reshape community, reshape education rather. And so that's why Dr. James Wilson is here today. And so Dr. James, I'll give you his bio. He is an incredible educator. He is past education of career, technology, and education in large urban school districts, where he became aware of how piecemeal career technical education was inefficient in preparing young people for employment. He earned a doctorate in education from USC, go Trojans, and managed a career in technical education programs in San Diego City schools for over 30 years. Dr. Wilson is here with us today to share about his new book, The Cataclysmic Failure of the American Schools. Welcome, Dr. James Wilson.
Thank you. Can't wait to share information with you. I'm excited to be here.
Definitely. Awesome. Thank you very much for accepting the invitation to be here. A lot of our listeners and a lot of our viewers often find content from the authors really relevant to their current situation. And when we talk about current situations and the current dynamics of what we're dealing with, when you and I first met a few months ago, we talked about the school to prison pipeline, and that stuck with me. And then we talked about the current environment of students and what they're learning and how the high schools are operating. And we're moving through that space. And one of the things Andrea just said actually was the first two sentences of your book, The Cataclysmic Failure. We have the power to take actions today to make changes that can create a better world in the future. We have the power to use the American high school career academies to create a country with a highly skilled and highly paid workforce. That's what we're going to be talking tonight, right?
Yes. And it can be done. We have the power to do it. And it's not that expensive because most of the costs of high school are already paid. So it's just the leadership that's lacking.
Well, can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Well, let's start at the beginning. The school to prison pipeline is a disaster in this country. We're looking at almost 1 million high school kids drop out of school every year. Okay, every year. So look at that over 10 years, 10 million kids, 20 years, 20 million kids. Then you say, okay, that's not good, but so what? Well, the so what is you look at the prisons. We have the most people in prison in the world, 2.5 million. 70% of them are high school dropouts. 70%. And then add on to that, there's another 4.5 million on parole and probation. 70% of them. So you're looking at a group of 7 million people. And of course, that changes from time. People go off parole and they get out of prison. There's new people that come in. So again, you need to look at it over time. It's an incredible number of people that don't have to be going through this, because the alternative is high school career academies. We know the research right here in California, they have a program called the California Partnership Academies. They graduate 95% of their kids, and they mix kids from different ethnic groups and different economic groups, and they all graduate 95%, and they all go to work. One of the things we need to do, this thing's falling off, is follow up doing longitudinal work after kids leave school. School boards are making decisions, and they don't have the information. What happens to kids when they leave school, like 2/3 of them are in college. You go, oh, that's great. Well, only 30% graduate. So what happens to the rest of them? The great majority of them go to the community college, and they have to take what's called a test. And they don't do well on the test because they weren't good high school students in the first place. So they have to take remedial classes. Well, what this does is essentially their way of forcing the kids out of school. So the dropout rate of the community colleges is enormous. So you have the dropouts who drop out of high school. Then you got a large group of kids who drop out of the community college, all on the street, unemployable. And then we say, oh, gee, they get involved in gangs and prostitution and drugs and all kinds of negative things. And that's how they end up, the school to prison pipeline works.
Wow.
There's no one to speak for them. And you know what the school boards do? Nothing. The school boards, when the kids leave the school system, they're no longer their problem. So my high school career academies are fabulous, but school, why I wrote my new book is career technical education by itself is not enough. The American high schools condescend to these low achieving kids. They condescend to the teachers of the career technical education programs. They condescend to the kids in the career technical education courses. It's all this. I mean, I have a doctorate in education, and it's like a top 1/3 of 1% of education in the country. Does that make me worth more than the kid that doesn't go to college? Is there some inherent value that's it's so? But the system's treating them that way. Can you imagine? Let's say you're a 90 IQ kid. You're looking at 13 years of being abused because you don't do well in school, when you don't have the ability to do well in school.
Because it sets you up for failure.
Exactly. Oh, it beats you down. The self-esteem is just beaten on. And then you get to high school, and it's not just one teacher. You got 5 or 6 at a time saying you're
because they've read what the other teachers said about them in elementary and junior high school, and they're carrying that information over into their learning process. And so they're just assuming they're going to be that same kid. Right.
And so why are we surprised, though, that the kid drops out of school? Because they're being beaten up. They're being told they're not bright, they're lazy, they're not trying. When the majority of them, that's just who they are. Because many of this high school curricula now is a college prep curricula that the kid's supposed to go through. Algebra 1, Algebra 2, geometry, biology, chemistry. Well, I have a book right over here.
So you get socially...
It's called the math myth. There it is. Only 7% of us use algebra in work. Yet they're trying to make every kid take algebra. You know what this book says?
Not just algebra 1, 2, and 3.
Yes.
Not just one time. They have to take it 3 times, and yeah.
And some kids don't get the symbolism. You don't need it. It's nonsense. You know who made up that thing? The book talks about it. University professors of math wanted kids to take more math classes, so they had more jobs. They made it up. They said, you don't understand logic unless you take a bunch of math. You don't need it. All the science classes, you don't need it. It's just awful. We're trying to shove these kids through this. So what happens is the kids don't do well, and they drop out of school.
So is this what you talk about in your book, where you say the education system that we're in right now is the number one reason above all other reasons that I forget how you worded it. I'm paraphrasing. So my question is, why does education surpass all other issues we face in the United States?
Excellent question. Excellent question. We have institutions and we have cities, counties, schools. They're different institutions. The schools are the one institution that can actually grab these kids, get their attention, and change their lives. Prevention is much better to do when you have the kids than to worry about trying to fix it after the fact, which is what the police do. After the schools push them out of school, they get involved in crime. The police have to grab them and deal with them. Well, what if you dealt with that up front in the schools and helped them like my wife did? Every one of her kids had a job, and they were every economic and ethnic group imaginable. Literally people from all over the world in our classes, and they all went to work. So once they go to work, and if you're looking at people get married and you have two incomes, a good example is we have a career academy here in San Diego called the Construction Career Academy at Kearney High School, and I helped put that together.
Yay, comment. I'm a comment. I'm a comment guy.
Just a sec. They drive these big construction machines, and they can make $80,000 a year. Now they don't don't make 80,000 because sometimes they don't work all the time. But imagine if you're a woman, a black woman, a gray woman, any color, and now their power. You don't have to be a big, strong person to do it. They can do that job. Imagine they marry somebody, and they're doing it. They're making 160,000. They're living in La Jolla, So it's all doable. But to get to your real question, the bottom line, and this is really why I wrote my book, the American high schools have not accepted the responsibility for preparing youth for after high school. They have one exclusive mission that they've accepted, and that is preparing kids to go to college. And 70% of the kids are not going to go graduate from college. So what they've done is abrogate their responsibility to the super majority of kids. And it's unbelievable that this goes on and on and on. And it's a tragedy for the country. So that's why the high school is so important. I have a good friend who's a dean of students up at Napa College, and he says, oh no, the community colleges can take care of occupational education. I go, that's true, they can. So why is your high school career academy so important then? They're so important because the highest dropout rate in high school, goes back to your algebra question, is ninth grade. Algebra is the flunk out course. It's right. Like in med school, they have an organic chemistry class. It's the flunk out course. Same thing. The kids can't handle algebra, then they have to take it over again in the sophomore year because they didn't do well in the first. And then they have to take a third class, as you said. So the high school needs to, as an institution, needs to accept the responsibility for preparing all these kids so they can go to work and not just college. So the institution has failed, and that's why I call it a cataclysmic failure. They've failed their responsibility to these kids. And it's not black kids, it's not brown kids, it's not white kids, it's all kids need these skills. And, well, that's the next topic, but I'll jump into it.
So Dr. Wilson, real quick,
yeah.
Is it the premise of an institution is you get out of it what you put into it? So although we say the highest dropout rate is in ninth grade, and then the second highest dropout rate is in 13th grade or the first year of junior college or college for that matter. And if we're looking at both of those grade ranges, isn't there a level of responsibility as a student that for me to engage? And that's by definition an institution, right?
Good question. Good question, Steph. Student engagement is a sort of a key. It's back to your self-esteem issue earlier. I'd like to see a study done in self-esteem as you go along through a career academy. But to get to your specific point, one of the things career academies do is they build your self-esteem as your skills build. As my wife took these kids from ninth grade through 12th grade, each year they became more confident in their field. The same thing is true in the construction academy, electronics, where they do computer game. They make machines. They work on all this kind of stuff. You build that self-esteem as you move along. Okay. Instead of beating it down, it builds it up, creating what you were talking about, which is self-esteem, and it's engagement in the school. Now, not only do they tear down their engagement in the school, when they don't do well in school, my daughter's a special ed teacher at San Diego High School. Some of her kids don't, most of her kids, almost all of her kids don't do well in school, but some of them are good athletes. One of them wants to play basketball at the high school. Well, they don't have the grade point, so they don't let the kid play the sport, even though he's got a disability. It's just crazy. So the engagement piece is the high school's response. That's, again, it's something they don't do now that they need to do, is create accept the responsibility for getting these kids into these programs that the kids like, and working with them and respecting them and respecting their teachers. And that's some of the change that has to happen. We've got to retrain. You had a principal on last week, and I'm sure he's a great guy. A lot of the principals I dealt with were, I have a new term, which is in the book stuff, implicit educational elitism. It really, I got that from implicit racism, where these people seem to be meaning well, but they do racist things. Well, this is the same thing. They think they're doing good things educationally by requiring all these college prep courses, but they're actually harming more kids than they're helping.
Right. So what I hear you saying, thank you for your feedback on that question. So what I hear you saying is that schools, due to the lack of them accepting responsibility for children's education and going from getting enough education to graduate high school and either deciding to go to college, but at least they can go and earn a living for themselves, especially for the lower economic bracket. So what I hear you saying is, when they don't do that, we create this school to prison pipeline with these youth with low self-esteem that don't think that they're capable of achieving. Is that what I heard you saying?
Not only not capable of achieving, so they leave school, but not capable of doing anything. So that leads them to criminal activities, drugs. Kids die of drug overdoses. Kids sell drugs. Kids end up in prison because of them. All these things, all these negative consequences don't have to happen. The basis for most of that is economics. They want the same thing any young person wants. They want to go out to dinner. They want to take their girlfriend out to dinner. They want to get an apartment. They want a car. Normal economic issues. But they can't get a job because they're unemployable. They have no skills. And another whole topic, which is a good subtopic, I'll jump right into it, is soft skills. In career academies, they teach soft skills. Well, what are soft skills? What do you think? Well, they're obvious. No, they're not. Kids don't know they have to show up to work every day on time, or they get fired. When they go to breaks, they have to come back on time, or they get fired. Go to lunch. They have to dress appropriately. They have to have proper hygiene, dress appropriately. You can't be rude to other workers. You have to work well with people of different ethnic backgrounds. You have to work well with gay people. These are no longer things you can get away with that you might have been able to get away with in the past. And they're good things, but you got to tell the kid about them and then have the kid practice them. You know what they did at Mission Bay High School, my wife taught? When the time came for class, the teachers would lock the door. Kid had come and couldn't get in. Vice principals came along and swept him up and had a little talk with him and said, what happens when you go to work? You're not there on time. You can't just be on time. You got to be there 10 minutes early. And this is, again, this was news to these kids. So soft skills and technical skills, they're two separate, completely different things. I mean, but it works when you put them together in a high school career academy where the whole concept of supporting employment is respected.
And they think they're doing the right thing because this is what's been given to them, but they're really not. Which brings me to how do schools, like, can you give us 3 things how schools create desperate youth and criminals?
basically what earlier I was explaining is they push kids out of school. They call them push-outs. That's the rude term. I have before me, now where is it? There it is, Dropouts in America. That's written by Gary Orfield, and he's in charge of the Civil Rights Project at UCLA now. He was at Harvard when he wrote the book, but he fell in love with a gal at UCLA and moved there. Anyway, he says it's a civil rights issue. That's because it literally, the high school, what we don't see is the high school is the cause of the problem because of this high academic curriculum. The result of that is pushing kids out the back door. And when they go out the back door, there's no place to go. It's all negative. There's, again, nobody takes responsibility for that. Oh, gee, the kid wasn't doing his homework. He wasn't doing well in algebra when he should have been. Oh, that's a side issue, which I might as well jump into too. When you're taking all these college prep courses, it doesn't give you the time in your schedule to do the other things that you need to do. My wife was a home economics major before she went to business management. She says, why aren't we teaching nutrition? We have an explosion of diabetes and overweight people. Yeah. Physical education, why aren't they teaching physical education, not just play ball? I mean, actually get on a elliptical machine and learn lifelong exercise. I live in Scripps Ranch, right up the street here is the Marine base. They have these car dealerships. You don't buy a car there. You go, what do you mean you don't buy a car? Of course you do. No, you're buying a bank contract at 20% interest. We don't teach consumer math. Instead, we're teaching algebra, which a kid doesn't need. I just showed you the book. The guy, they don't need the algebra, but they need consumer math.
And there's no financial literacy to begin with.
Exactly. Right. Credit cards. You get a credit card, and most people I know pay them off every month. Other people don't, and they end up paying 12% on that. So we have a multiple hit thing. They can't find a job. They can't use their money. They don't eat right. Oh, I forgot parenting. I mean, I had 2 kids. Nobody told me how to bring them up. I'm sure I could have used a course in parenting. No. The point is there's computer education. Every kid should have Excel, Word. They should have proficiencies in computer education before they leave school. These are lifelong things you need to be able to do. But because they're taking biology and chemistry, which they don't need, there's no time in the curriculum for these very serious lifelong educational needs.
Here in Claremont High School, let's use Claremont High School specifically.
I know the school well.
Yeah, we had pathways, right? We had the career CTA, career technical, academies. We had health, we had computers, we had business, and I forget what the other one was. But they weren't very successful because of the sheer number of dropouts. Do you think that even though we made that effort to go into a CTA platform and format and model, that some of the ancillary classes like algebra impacted that performance?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, again,
so to make sure I was right.
Well, let's go back to the 90 IQ kid who flunks out of those things. You know what happens when they flunk the algebra? They have to take it over the next year. What happens when they flunk biology? They have to take it over the next year. They hate it. It has no relevance in their lives. So right. They're not dropping out of the career technical education program. They're dropping out of the academic program, which is only appropriate for the college prep kid, which is 30% nationally graduating from college. But in urban school districts, it's more like 20%. And by the way, I should frame this as Claremont High School actually was a home of the AVID program, which was targeting particularly Black kids, but other kids too, to try and help them get to college. When they saw that based on really good test scores, they went, this kid needs to be pushed. And it's one of the great successes in the country, in San Diego City schools. It's great. But again, that's targeting these really, really bright kids on the top 20 or 30%. You leave out the 70%. Right. So yes, one of the things you need to do is we got to go back to parents meeting with counselors. And if Johnny's not doing well in school, And he would love to study electronics or auto mechanics or construction or nursing. I went to Lincoln High School. I set up their academy there in health. And true story, I was at Kaiser Hospital getting some blood taken. And here's this black nurse. I thought nurse, but she wasn't. She was a blood person. I've forgotten the name of them. And she came out of Lincoln High School. She took my blood. I went, this is a success. This is what we meant.
Proof in motion.
Yes.
Phlebotomist.
Yeah, thank you.
Right.
Well,
So-
we had to close the program because of AIDS, actually, but it did run for 10 years.
That's incredible. So your successes, I'm sure, have attributed, like a lot of educators, if you kind of line up some of your students and go, this is what I've been saying, you'd have a long history of successes, I'm sure.
All over the county here, but also all over the country there are successes. The problem is there are enough, and these elitists, I can't say this strongly enough. This elitist education thing is harmful to kids. It's child abuse. It's harmful. It's not fair to the kid. And then you're trying to assess them with these. It's unbelievable. The assessment is wrong.
It's not apples to apples.
Right, it's not apples to apples. And then to your point, it's almost like we're at the point now where we're in a time that distance learning is an opportunity. So in your mind, is this new distance learning model an opportunity or another failure?
That's very current time. My daughter is teaching special ed at San Diego High, trying to do distance learning. It's a disaster. Doesn't work. There's the divide, the digital divide, of course, for poverty people. But it's not just that. My wife taught computers at Mission Bay and Morris High School and other places. And, the kids beat up the equipment. The kids don't want to be there. It doesn't overcome the relevance issue. The kids see no relevance to biology and chemistry and biology and foreign language. And so distance language, if it's done well, still doesn't work because you're not overcoming the relevance to the kid, the engagement issue for the kid, no matter what you do. And the hands-on stuff, they have different kinds of learning. You've heard of a kinesthetic learner, visual learner. Well, if you're a kid, you could be a 90 IQ kid who could take apart an auto engine and put it back together again.
Absolutely.
You've heard of the guy at Harvard. I wrote it down actually, but Howard Gardner. I remember. Excuse Steph. Howard Gardner talked about multiple intelligences.
Right.
That there's a lady down the street who's an artist, makes a lot of money selling her art. I can't. I have a doctorate. I can't paint, but we taught a class in computer art, and if you're good and fast, you can make $100,000 a year. So animators, it was animation class, but you had to be fast, you had to be good, and not everybody is. But if you were, and I went and visited an animation shop, and I talked to these animators, and they were young people who loved it. And I said, well, what do you mean you love it? I said, they'll work till 10 o'clock at night because they're immersed in it and they love it. So this is back to assess a point of engagement.
Once we're over about 12 years old, we're seldom encouraged to be nice. We're expected to make efforts in all kinds of areas, chiefly around work. But the idea of expending energy thinking about and then practicing the art of niceness sounds bizarre, even eerie. That's why we've drawn up a checklist of 10 virtues that we think matter more than ever in the modern age. Resilience. This is the art of keeping going even when things are looking dark, of accepting reversals as normal, of refusing to frighten others with one's own fears, and of remembering that human nature is in the end reassuringly tough. Empathy. The capacity to connect imaginatively with the sufferings and unique experiences of another person. The courage to become someone else and look back at oneself with honesty. Patience. We lose our temper because we believe that things should be perfect. We've grown so good in some areas, like putting men on the moon, we're ever less able to deal with things that still insist on going wrong, like traffic, government, other people. We should grow calmer and more forgiving by getting more realistic about how things actually tend to go. Sacrifice. We're hardwired to seek our own advantage, but also have this miraculous ability very occasionally to forego our own satisfactions in the name of someone or something else. We won't ever manage to raise a family, love someone else, or save the planet if we don't keep up with the art of sacrifice. Politeness. Politeness has a bad name. We often assume it's about being fake, which is meant to be bad, as opposed to really ourselves, which is meant to be good. However, given what most of us are really like deep down, we should spare others too much exposure to our deeper selves. We need to learn manners, which aren't evil. They're the necessary internal rules of civilization. Politeness is very linked to tolerance, to a capacity to live alongside people whom one won't necessarily agree with, but at the same time won't be able to avoid. Humor. Seeing the funny sides of situations and of oneself doesn't sound very serious, but it's integral to wisdom, because it's a sign that one's been able to put a benevolent finger on the gap between what we want to happen and what life can actually provide. Like anger, humor springs from disappointment, but it's disappointment optimally channeled. It's one of the best things we can do with our sadness. Self-awareness. To know oneself is to try not to blame others for one's troubles and moods, to have a sense of what's going on inside oneself and what actually belongs to the world. Forgiveness. Forgiveness means a long memory of all the times when we wouldn't have got through life without someone cutting us some slack. It's recognizing that living with others isn't possible without excusing errors. Hope. The way the world is now is only a pale shadow of what it could one day be. We're still only at the beginning of history. As you get older, despair becomes far easier, almost reflex, whereas in adolescence it was still cool and adventurous. Pessimism isn't necessarily deep, nor optimism shallow. Confidence. The greatest projects and schemes die for no grander reason than that we don't dare. Confidence isn't arrogance, it's based on a constant awareness of how short life is and how little we ultimately lose from risking everything. Let's try to keep these in mind and practice them a little every day.
So the experts are saying that there's kids are going to lose if not 6 months to a year and a half of learning because of COVID. So I guess we're just saying it's a failure, but I also see it as an opportunity. So I see it as an opportunity for people like us that think outside of the box and want school to be different for the future. So I'm encouraging those that are watching right now and listening to this program. It is our opportunity to have our voices heard, be at those school board meetings, have your voice heard, be a part of groups like Got School, and so that you can learn what it is we need to be asking for, and more importantly, taking back control of our children's educations. So
I have a point on that. In the book, there's a essay on having a community education board that the school board would appoint, and you guys would be perfect people to be on it, where the board talks to people about philosophy and about issues on a monthly basis. We actually talk about what the school should be doing, which schools, what kinds of programs, what makes sense, what engages kids, sort of what you're doing.
Plumber, I've come to fix the sink.
Who is it?
It's the plumber. I've come to fix the sink.
Who is it?
It's the plumber. I've come to fix the sink.
Who is it?
It's the plumber. I've come to fix the sink. Ooh. Oh.
the sink.
So many layers in this. So we're getting close to the end here, and I just want to get this last question and it's extra credit. So we call this the extra credit. What 3 books do you recommend that a high school student read that isn't in the curriculum? And it could be an author as well.
I have them, but let me preface this with, if they're in a high school career academy, they need to be reading about their subject matter, whether it's police or construction or marketing. But there's a book called What Color is Your Parachute, which is a book where they think about how their skills and interests match with the real world. One's called The Confidence Code, The Science and Art of Self-Assurance, What Women Should Know. So it's something, again, for a woman to go into construction, it's famous for their sexual remarks that men make.
Right.
Well,
Absolutely.
you need self-assurance to handle that. But it's crazy. Don't give up a job making $80,000 a year because you're worried some guy's going to make a remark. And then there's some software on your computer. It's not a book. One's called Career One Stop, Source for Career Exploration, Training and Jobs by the U.S. Department of Labor. Another one called Career Test, and another called My Plan. The reason that's important, and this goes back to something Steph was talking about, is you don't want the dropout rate of these programs to be very high. So you really need to do what they call career exploration before you get into the career academy, preferably in the 8th grade. I talk in the book about either an 8th grade program or a middle school program. You could have a 2 or 3 year program, or at least a summer school program. So you don't put a kid in a police academy who doesn't want to be there.
Right.
So if they're motivated to be there, and this is what we found at the construction academy, very low dropout rate, the kids wanted to be there. And that leads to even further engagement. So they stick in the program, they go to work, they're happy.
Nice. Well, Dr. Wilson, that's great information. Thank you very much for that. It's a pleasure having you on our show, Got School. You've shared some really good insight, and your book, you know, the cataclysmic failure of the American high school is definitely a must read. And this is how thick it is, folks. If you haven't gotten there, and here's where I'm at. So it's definitely a good book, and it helps, you know, really guide where we need to go coming out of this COVID environment. So this very last section that we have, Dr. Wilson, is really, it's what are you up to? And this is where we kind of have some fun and just really explore what each of us are up to beyond what we just talked about. And so as our guest tonight, I'd like to kick it over to you. So what are you up to?
Well, I've written 4 novels that are on Amazon, which you can read under my pen name, Chesney Wilson. I recommend them. One of them is called China Bill, about my wife's father in World War II. It's great. The rest are fun too. Read them. But the thing I'm doing is, which you may be involved with Barbara Bree, is I'd like to find some money, substantial money, to go to the school board and get them to change their elitist graduation requirements and offer 10 new high school career academies, including the police academies we were talking about earlier. So I'm hoping Barbara will win, and I'm hoping she will implement these and create a model for the country where people up in Washington and back east can model these career academies and change the country. So that's my big excitement. I'm writing 2 new novels, and I'm planning a trip to France, where I've been several times, where I have another novel that I'm planning.
That's great. Dr. Wilson, understand that the Urban Alchemy 360 Network and all of its cohorts are prepared, willing, and able to change the way our education system is operating today. And it really having that influence and leverage on the school board from a parent stakeholder perspective and not necessarily a specific union perspective, you know, can really help save our children and create the high school experience that you suggested and that is needed for sure.
That can be done. That you got to bring mayors, chambers of commerce, unions, community organizations, all need to get involved.
Well, speaking of getting involved, There's no one on this planet, including myself, who is more involved than Andrea. Andrea, what are you up to in the world?
Well, we are up to some really exciting things. We are going to be making some drastic changes and helping assist navigating changes in the educational system here on the UA 360 network, as well as working abroad with our partner, Robin Lockhart in London. So that's exciting. That's coming for us. So be looking forward to a project between the UK and the United States. The other thing that we're working on is this network. We really are set on creating content that brings value through knowledge on the UA 360 network. So if you want to get to us and hear more about that, right down there in email us at hello@urbanalchemy360.com, and we'll get you all the information you need to be a part of the UA 360 network. And of course, I also want to mention that we're building with our Coalition for Global Sustainability, communities rather, for global sustainability in Paradise, California. We are facing wildfires right now. That's probably, unfortunately, due to environmental issues going to continue in California. But this fire in the city of Paradise was the era of the power company. They actually knew that this could happen, and they chose not to repair the lines. So we're helping them rebuild that city through our Communities for Global Sustainability, and hanging out with Steph Gross. Steph, what are you up to in the world?
Well, it's been a very turbulent past week for me. I like to call it my ride on the emotion coaster, because it's full of ups and downs. But one of the things that's really gotten me twisted, is just how our major companies and our organizations continually dance around the right solutions. They think that, the federal government's going to step in and give more stimulus money to businesses. The federal government has stopped giving extra stimulus money to us Americans. Businesses are held up at this point, and layoffs are happening. Disneyland laying off 29,000. You got the airlines laying off tens and 14s of thousands of employees. And unfortunately, that's going to continue. So one of the things that I've been working on locally here with my cohorts, you and Mailon in the UA 360 network, Robin Lockhart, Dan Anderson up there in Canada, and we want to fold in Dr. Jim Wilson here, is the spirit of gratitude and creating the share economy, where our connective tissue literally allows us to share every aspect of it. We currently share our homes, we share our food, we share our rides, we share our economic struggles, we share our pain. But one of the things we don't share is our economy and our economic profitability, which only the 1% and the less than 1% of our country get to experience and enjoy. We can change that dynamic. We can fundamentally change it. And so I'm working through the Gratitude Reward Solution program and sharing that throughout the world and inviting everyone to participate. So that's what I'm working on, and that's what I'm focused on. By the last week, I just want to give another shout out to International Coffee Day. So Legacy Parenting Survival Brew, we offered some great discounts over there. And again, for all you distance learning parents and who are working from home and struggling, Legacy Parenting Survival Brew. It's coffee that works for you. So that's what I'm working on.
So you've been watching Got School. We're here to provide you resources. Thank you for tuning in. We'll see you next week. Same bat time, same bat channel. Good night.